Happy holidays and welcome to Lady Dynamite Creates. Today we're going to be seeing the process on my Santa's Helper doll. I'm using an Ever After High Briar Beauty doll that came to me mostly pre-prepped. I did need to heat the head up with some boiling water and let it sit for a few moments and pop the head off. Then I used 100% acetone to wipe off the face paint. After she's nice and clean, I go ahead and give her scalp a coat of white acrylic paint because I plan on rerooting this doll with some white metallic hair. The hair that I'm using is the new DGHQ low temperature nylon from the Doll Planet, and the color is metallic white, and I have to say this is fantastic hair. It is the neatest hair I've ever rerooted with. It's very nice and silky. I prefer to use the knotting technique where you wrap the hair around your finger and then slide the needle on and then tighten that hair around the needle. I find that I get fewer plug loss doing it this way. Now normally when I reroot a doll head, I have all of my plugs neatly laid out to use as I go along. That way it cuts down on hair loss and the mess of the hair. However, this hair didn't require that. This hair is so nice and neat and naturally clumps into plug-sized pieces. And as you can see, I'm just picking it straight up off the hank and it's just perfect. To reroot the part line, I go straight down one side of the head, pull all of that hair to the side, and then I go back in on the other side and plug into the same holes, and I pull the hair into the opposite direction. And once I'm finished with the reroot, I use a little bit of liquid fusion glue and I spread it into the head with a paintbrush and make sure to coat all of the inside plugs to make sure they stay in place. Now on to the face up. I have all of my watercolor pencils and pastels, and I've also left a list of these in the description box below so you can see the products that I use. After prepping my doll with 3 coats of Mr. Super Clear, I can get started on the face up. The first thing that I start doing here is blocking in the eye shape. And I just block out my left eye because I have a harder time matching shapes with it, so I do my left one and then match to my right. And I use a little bit of water on a paintbrush to help lift up any stray lines. And once I'm happy with my eye shape, I go ahead and give it a coat of white to get a good base down. I do many coats of the white throughout the doll just to get a good solid color on the sclera. And I actually seal the doll at this point because I want to set in my eye shape before I go and start blushing, because if I need to erase anything or mess something up, I don't want to have to erase that along with my blushing. Now that I've contoured the large areas, I go in with my short stubby brush and contour around the eye socket and the nose and mouth. I find that if you do want to make your own little brush like this, to take a brush that has a little bit stiffer bristles. If the bristles are too soft, you will wind up just rubbing the metal end on the face. And I do several contour passes along the course of the doll, just making sure to get in the ears, right around the nostrils, and I like to give dolls this little bagging, like right underneath the eye. And then I go ahead and start the blushing on the doll, and I start with a very light pale pink, and then I do a brighter red on top of that in the center. I make sure to give a good coating on the nose and right around the eyes because she is a North Pole elf. She's going to have some wind burn on her. I apply a coat of bright red to her lips. I really wanted those to pop. And then I also highlight in her forehead and bridge of the nose. Now with my watercolor pencils, I make some details in the lips and darken up the corners of the mouth. For her waterline, I go in with a deeper red around the corners, and then I blend that out. And I darken up her eyeliner, and then I use the trick again with the paintbrush with just a little bit of water on it to pull up any stray line. And I define her eyelid creases. Now using the green pan pastels, I start adding in her eyeshadow. I later on decide that I do not like the deepest color on those, and so I go in with my watercolor pencils and make those colors more vibrant. So now to add her eyebrows. I know she has white hair, but I just really don't like white eyebrows. So I'm going in with brown and I'm doing my dot method. Middle dots, high point, low point. And then I connect the dots and clean that up with an eraser. We can just pretend she dyes her hair white. So I do another pass of detail lines on the lips, and then I decided that green just wasn't popping enough, so I go in with a very vibrant yellow and brighten that up. And then I go in with the pastel pencil and highlight the eyebrows on the brow bone, and then I go ahead and hit the lips with some pops of white highlight as well. I really wanted her nose to have a very cute button nose look, so I go in with my watercolor pencil and then I start defining out some of those lines, really drawing attention to like the bulbous tip and the sides. Now let's get some shape to that iris. I go in with a very pale blue, and then once I'm happy with that shape, I go in and darken it with a darker medium blue. Then I block in the color. I do several coats throughout the course of this face up just to get the vibrancy and the blending that I want. I find that a blending pencil works really well to help blend out the eyes, as well as sometimes just picking the watercolor straight off of the pencil and applying it down to help blend out. I decided that her cheeks were just not rosy enough, so I went in with another coat of pastels to really liven it up. I figure she lives at the North Pole, and if you've ever spent a winter out, you know how windburned and red your face can get from spending a lot of time outdoors. So I really wanted to pump up that red. Then I also decided to add some freckles in to give her that very worn, outdoorsy feel. Now I go in and start adding in my details to the eyes, adding in the dark and the light striations. And then I add in her pupils, which I kind of regret doing because after I've gone back looking at the footage, I really liked the look of her with just the darker blue in the eye. But what's done is done. Maybe in the future I do a doll with monochromatic pupils. Now with a very sharp pencil I add in her eyelashes, and I'm actually really pleased with these eyelashes. They turned out very nice. Now the final steps of her face up are giving her her eye shines as well as the highlights to her waterline. For this I use my gouache paints and a teeny tiny paintbrush. Next I go in and add some subtle highlights to the tops of the eyelashes as well as some highlighting white lines into her eyebrows. Now that her face up is done, we can move on to the clothes. And the first thing I've done is cut out the fabric for her tights out of this stripy material, and then I pin it right sides facing and sew up the back and the front seam. Now we're going to sew up the inside of the legs. I start my pinning at the crotch and do a few pins, then I move to the toes, pin a couple more, and then match up the side seams up the side. Then when I get to ready to sew it, I start at the center crotch seam and sew down each side of the leg. This way they stretch evenly. For the skirt, I've cut out my pattern piece in this red fabric and I am attaching this white trim. Then I add on an elastic waistband and sew up the back seam. In the end, I decided the fabric was too stiff for this big of a skirt, so this did get cut in half. For her coat, I'm using a pattern from DG Requiem. This is their winter coat pattern. I take the two back pieces and I put those right sides facing and pin up the back and sew it down. Then I take the two front pieces and pin those right sides facing and sew those together as well. Once those pieces are all together, I can sew the back and the front together at the shoulder seams. So for her sleeves, I wanted to add some of that same white trim that I used on the skirt. So I take the fabric and I lay it down and I cut two pieces from the back side of this fur with a craft knife. Using a knife to cut your fur from the back side will keep you from having that blunt cut fur look. It'll let it retain its natural taper. Then I just top stitch this down to the bottom of the sleeve. Now to attach the sleeves to the coat. I match up the center point of the armhole to the center point of the sleeve, and then I pin that together, and then I match up the two edge points as well. This will make sure that your sleeve is sewn on evenly. Once the sleeves are on, then you fold the jacket in half, right sides facing, and then you sew down the arms and down the sides of the jacket. I find that it works best if you start at the seam for the armhole and sew down the side of the jacket, then come back to that point and sew down the sleeve. After I got my jacket sewed, I decided I wanted to change up the shape a little bit. I was very inspired by the clothing in Elf and in Rankin & Bass films, and like the curved edge, so I changed up the silhouette a bit, and then I added in this gold trim. Now I'm going to add in the collar, and I'm going to hand stitch this on. It's just a little bit easier than putting it on the machine, and I just do a whip stitch around the edge. The fur hides it, and then I top stitch down a red poinsettia as decoration as well. I decided that she needed a belt, so I looked on Thingiverse and found this pirate belt buckle. Then I took it and scaled it to doll size, did a little squash and stretch to get it to the right proportions. I then printed it, cleaned it up, and painted it gold. For the belt itself, I took a little bit of faux leather and cut it to the right thickness and length to fit around her. Attached it to the belt buckle and then used Velcro attachments in the back. For her shoes, I'm using the same model I do for the witch shoes I've previously made with some alterations. I get them and I paint them green, but decided I didn't like this green, so went back in again with some other green. Did a couple of coats of that, and then added some gold to the bottoms. After looking at that, I decided there just wasn't enough bling to this, so she got some glitter green on top of it. Then I added these little red sparkly puffballs to the tips. Ta-da! Elf shoes! My lovely daughter came up with the great idea that the elf needed a present. So to do this, I've taken this little jewelry box and I've cut out a piece of wrapping paper to wrap around this because I do want the present to be able to be opened to see the surprise that she's bringing to another doll. I use a little bit of a stick glue and I glue all that paper on and down. Then I repeat the steps for the top of the box too. And then I finish off the box with some ribbons and a couple of bows. To style her hair, I have parted away some of her bangs and I have tied that off in a ponytail holder underneath at the nape of her neck. Then I'm securing a ribbon around her head using pins to hold the two ends in place. After that's in place, I get to curling. I'm using these flexible curling sticks to curl around the hair, and I'm just sectioning off parts and wrapping the hair around it. And once I've got all of the hair wrapped up in curlers, I give it a dunk with some really warm water, not boiling water, but warm, and let that sit until it's dry. Once dry, I can remove all these curlers, being careful to retain the curl. Once all the curlers are out, I go ahead and style by separating out some of the curls into smaller sections. All that's left is for her to get dressed now. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for the final photos. Remember, always be creating!